Well, thank you guys all for coming today. Like I said, I'm going to be talking to you a bit about excavations that are ongoing in Hungary. And apparently now you can see what's going on up here. We're good, right? You don't care about that. Fine, fine. Like Kendy said, make sure it works. So what's nice about the presentation that you guys received last month from Kendy Altizer and the presentation I'm giving this month is that you oftentimes get just the entail of any of these presentations, right? Or any of these projects, sorry, in terms of we tell you where we went and what we found. But we don't actually go into a lot of detail about what goes into making the sausage or what goes into making these projects actually happen. And so today I am happy to be able to tell you a little bit about that. And Kendy was able to describe how domestic field school projects go. I'm going to talk to you about international field school projects. And we have quite a few that we're going to tackle today. So when it comes to these international projects, I know this is going to drive Manny crazy having that on the screen right there, but it's fine. When it comes to international projects, there's a lot of similarities between international projects and domestic projects with the logistics that it takes to carry out this research. It takes a lot of different pieces of the puzzle to make this all happen. We have to get permits. Those permits are oftentimes going to be from a local government level all the way up to national government level. So there are different phases of permitting processing that we go through. We also have to get a team of international collaborators. You have to have people on the ground in the country that you're working in. I'm very fortunate to have wonderful collaborators in Hungary who make it seem a lot easier than it is to run a project in Hungary because they've been running projects for a long time. They know the ins and outs of how to get permits, of how to navigate the system. And so it makes my job a lot easier. In addition to those international collaborators, you also have to work with different institutions. And those institutions are going to be beneficial for any project that's working abroad. They allow you to actually go through that permitting process. So they're going to be instrumental. Grants shouldn't be too surprising. Grants are a definite need. Something that we always have to contend with is how much money do we need to run a project? Where's that money coming from? And is this feasible? Can the work that we want to do be feasible with the funds that we have? These are big questions that we have to grapple with all the time, and it's going to impact our research. We have to tailor our research then depending on if we get a grant or if we don't get a grant. And that cycle of applying for grants is never ending. It's a process that you continue to do. Even after you get money, you can always use more money. And so I put that on there as a note that this granting cycle is one that is also very instrumental to our research. We have different specialists that we rely on. I am one person. I can't do it all. I can't be the ceramic specialist, the person who also does the archaeobot or studies the plants. I can't be the person who studies the faunal or the animal bones or the human bones. It's too many things for one person to do. And so we rely on different specialists. We bring them in. We entice them with our cool projects, hopefully. And they are going to be a big part of the project as well. And then we have to think about the landowners, where we're doing this research. Now, a lot of times, at least in Hungary in particular, a lot of the research is going to be done on private land. And it's totally up to the farmers whether or not we can carry out the research on their land. According to Hungarian law, you can do certain types of archaeological research without landowner permission, but we know that that's pretty unethical. We don't want to do that. Why foster these negative relationships? We should be doing this work in collaboration with the local landowners and getting them jazzed about what's on their sites, or excuse me, what's on their land. And so this is another big factor that we have to take in consideration. Then we also have logistics. Now, this is a big category that includes things like lodging, transportation, food, you know, kind of like the basic essentials in order to make people want to come on the project and to make the project actually function. Students, another huge component, because we want to be able to utilize these projects in order to help students figure out if this is the career path for them, if this is something that they want to continue doing, or if it's something that they don't want to continue doing. Having field experience is going to be instrumental for their futures. I always tell students, archaeology sounds like a lot of fun, but you should always, always, always participate in field school because it weeds out a lot of people. People are like, oh no, I don't think this is for me at all. I hate it. It's dirty. Did you know there was dirt? And you're like, oh, kind of got that. And it's hard work. It's tiring work. You work long hours. And even after you put in a good 8 hours in the field, come back, take a nap, and you have to do another 4 to 6 hours, data processing, data entering, analysis, et cetera, et cetera. These make for very long days, very short nights, and overall exhausting work. So if it's not for you, find out early. And then we have local government that also will be a factor that can be tied to permits, doesn't have to be tied to permits, but wherever you carry out your research, you should be doing this in collaboration, in connection, in conjunction with ongoing open relationships with the local governments. So for instance, we try to have different activities in which we present our results to local communities, and that will involve the local government. The mayor, for instance, of my town of Chifna, he came out and he visited the site both years that we've been there. And he also invited our students last year to a cookout at a local government-owned, it's kind of like a cultural house is what they would call it. And it was a wonderful time to just be able to engage with local people in that community. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I did not include my non-emotional support animal who comes with us on every project in Hungary. She gets a special tile there. She's a piece of that puzzle. So when it comes to planning a project, this is another aspect that you guys don't often get to see. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that whenever we carry out projects, whether they're domestic or international, we have this long durée, the long thinking process that goes into it. These don't just happen overnight. And in fact, whenever I tell people this, I tell them that we usually plan a year in advance, if not more, in order to account for all the different activities that we need to do. So I made a nice little timeline for you all right here. So in August of a year, like let's just take this most recent August, we set the dates for the 2024 field projects that we're going to be running in Hungary. So in September, we apply for additional grants if we need additional grants. And remember, we always need additional grants. We also work on publications from the data that we were able to collect from the 2023 season, for instance. And we work on being able to finalize those official reports that need to be sent to individuals or to different institutions within the local governments, local and national governments. So there's a number of different things that we do in September. In October, we work on reserving our vehicles as well as our lodging for the next field season, so in 2024. In November of 2023, we're going to advertise for the season. You guys get like a little sneak preview tonight. In December and January, we make student selections, finalize all those. And then once we know who's going to be on the project, we apply for supplemental funding that's specifically targeted for students to fund additional student involvement. Sometimes that's going to be through universities, through UNG and UGA. Sometimes it's going to be through private institutions like the Archaeological Institute of America has different student grants. So we try to maximize the amount of student participation by applying for these supplemental fundings. Between February and March, we have to deal with the hard stuff. Sometimes this is going to occur earlier, but we also have to, now that we know who's going on the project, have to deal with like the Office of Global Engagement. We have to deal with departmental approvals. We have to deal with international health insurance. We have to deal with all of these, essentially just paperwork. We got a lot of paperwork to do in order to approve all the student participation that's going to occur. Then in March, we finally get to buy plane tickets, which seems kind of late, but that's usually the earliest that we can do it. And then in April, we get to do the archaeological permit and submission and approval This at least works in Hungary. In some countries, you're going to have to apply even earlier to do summer field work and get those permits approved. But for us, the turnaround's usually pretty quick. 4 to 6 weeks is by far enough time. And then from May to August, summer fun. Sometimes it can last just a short amount of time. But if you are lucky like me, you get to spend all summer doing it. So that's taking us to Hungary. Let's learn a little bit more about this majestic place. If you're not familiar, it's part of Eastern Europe, right over here. Keep on using lasers, not working up on the screen. And then the part of Hungary that I work in is southeastern Hungary in Békés County. This area that's encircled in red, that's primarily our study region. And that's referred to as the Kőrös region because there's 3 different Kőrös riverways that run through this area. Now, if you've never been to Hungary, don't worry. It's kind of like this, especially on the Great Hungarian Plain. Pretty flat, lots of fields, lots of animals, lots of crops, but pretty flat. So when we have changes in elevation, when we see small rises, these are oftentimes going to be indicative of different sites. So that's something really to keep in mind when working in this area. Now, I'm very fortunate because I am part of one of many projects in this area that are conducting different regional archaeological projects. You can see the timeline in terms of the earliest projects going back to 1998. My project's here, the Prehistoric Interactions on the Plain project. It started in 2013, co-directed by my Hungarian colleague, Dr. Danielle from the Dairy Museum. And we have a number of other projects too. But together, we've kind of formed what we like to refer to as the Kőrös Consortium. It's kind of a regal name. And if you'd like, you can follow us on Instagram. I strongly recommend it. We like to make posts even when we're not active in the field doing excavations. We have plenty of data to share with you. So we do try to update it fairly regularly. Now, within this Kőrös region, we have a headquarters. It's in the town of Vastu. This town has been a town that we've been conducting that archaeological work on since that 1998 date. So the town, the people there, they know us really well. We have really strong relationships with them. And it's been a pleasure, a joy to see this town grow over the years. In 2006, it was actually established as an official city, the city of Vastu. So it earned its cityship, meaning that it just had advanced both in terms of the population as well as the political structures within that town. So it was, again, we're seeing not just these projects evolve, but we're seeing life in southeastern Hungary evolve. In Vastu, we rent out this house, and I realized when I was searching for pictures, I've never taken a picture of the house that we stay in. Just one of those things that fell by the wayside, I guess. But it's this hunting cabin that has about 8 different rooms. Each has their own bathroom. We can accommodate usually around up to 19 people in the house. So multiple individuals in one room. The house is situated on this canal. So the canal wraps all the way around the house. It's like a little island. In fact, the structure is called Muzsdi Sziget, which means mosquito island. Lovely. You'll never guess what's out there. But it has this huge wraparound deck that we do like utilizing. It has plenty of space, not just for us to rest and relax and enjoy each other's company, but also it provides enough space to actually do the lab work on a regular basis. Because when you're doing lab work, you need to spread out. And ideally, you do a lot of lab work outside because it's dirty. But one of the biggest draws that we have for working in southeastern Hungary, by far, I think, is, I mean, the archaeology is great, but the food is amazing. And we know that the best way to keep your workers happy, keep yourself happy, is to be well fed. And for that, we have a couple different options. We have a fabulous cook who I also don't have a picture of, but Marika has been working with us since 1998 as well, if you can believe that. We've seen her children grow up from little babies all the way to having their own babies. So that's pretty miraculous and amazing. And she provides breakfast for us, as well as a home-cooked meal every evening. For lunch, we always go to the Veritas restaurant in town, and we have a really plentiful and huge meal that consists first of soup, because you always have soup, you start with soup. And then you have a main course. And so nobody ever complains about not being fed or not having enough food on this project. Promise you that. Now for today's talk, I'm going to be focusing on some of the different projects that we ran in 2023. Here's the town of Bakersfield right here. I circled it in yellow. And you'll see that the major areas, chicken compost system, all the way to the north, that's going to be one of the areas that we investigated. Bakersfield is another one. And Vacation Bardome is the third site that I'll be talking about, the third project. These circles represent 5-mile radius. So you can see the proximity of Bakersfield and our research questions all, are kind of like locked into the landscape right here. Can't get too far away from Bakersfield and all of our logistics and our logistical needs for their being met. Other site that you see on the screen right here, second one, I didn't want to take it away because I think it's a very important site that has been a part of our projects for the previous phases of research. And it's going to come back in with the project that's being done currently at Vacation Bardome. So we're going to be working at that in the near future. Don't worry, this map's going to come back so I can reorient you every time we talk about a new site. Now, it doesn't matter what projects I talk about. This is generally our schedule that we set for students and ourselves on a daily basis. Generally speaking, we have breakfast. Oh, you can't do that first one. We have breakfast between 6:30 and 7:30, and we leave for the site no later than 7:30. We're very strict about this. We arrive at the site before 8 o'clock, and you can expect to be at site from 8 to 2:15. Why do we leave at 2:15? Because we have to make it to the restaurant before they close. Priorities. The restaurant closes at 3, so we need to make it there and keep everybody fed and happy, right? So lunch is going to be at 2:45, and whenever lunch gets done, people have free time until 5:30. From 5:30 until 7:30, we generally have lab time. This is a little bit flexible because the other thing that we like to do, because it's an educational program, we do have lectures 2 to 3 times a week from different specialists. And so if it's a lecture night, we only have lab till 7, then we have lecture from 7 to 8. But then dinner's always at 8 o'clock. So whoever's giving a lecture knows to be done because we don't mess with food. And then it's free time after dinner. Marika, being the lovely individual that she is, who provides that breakfast and dinner for us, she also cleans all the dishes and takes care of us. She's the best archaeological mother that we could possibly ever ask for. So it allows us to maximize on that free time too. Or if you're a director of a project, the logistical planning time that you need. So let's start with our first project here. This is going to be the Kiddish Consortium that happened in the spring of 2023. The dates were April 10th to the 26th. For this project, we brought a number of students from the States, though this one was kind of restricted. It was a smaller project. It lasted only, 16 days, so 2-week project. And so because of that, we had 2 students from UGA and 1 student from UNG who joined us on this project, along with 5 different students from the University of Kiel, as well as 1 student from the ELTE University in Budapest. And I realize now that I did not give you that picture, so to reorient you, we're going to go down here. This is that spring project. They gave our site. So this site of Békésvárdom, it's a Bronze Age tell, and it has an external settlement that's in association with the tell. So the tell is here in the center. If you're not familiar with what a tell is going to be a man-made hill that's constructed over hundreds to thousands of years of people living in the same place. Sometimes these are intentionally constructed, sometimes they're accidentally. If you think about it, people build a house, they burn a house. They build a house right on top, they burn it, and all that debris and rubble slowly over time accumulates, resulting in a hill. Awesome. And in addition to this man-made hill, they also have external settlement area here and here. This weird image that you see on top of here is going to be the magnetometric data that we collected. Magnetometry allows us to see subsurface features and allows us then to identify things like houses, which is what these little rectangles are. Every one of these weird blobby rectangles is a house from the Bronze Age. So it allows us then to target specific areas to excavate. This is such a useful technique. Now I said it's a Bronze Age site, And for some of you, you don't know when the Bronze Age is, totally fine. It's gonna vary a little bit too, depending on your part of the world. So I put a nice little guide up here, a timeline to show you. We're talking about this period right over here in the Bronze Age. Now, because we were able to target different areas of the site, our goals for this past season in April were really to determine if what we're identifying with magnetometry is actually what we find in the ground when we open it, when we excavate. And so we opened a number of different units, 3 blocks to be exact. And along the way, we also had wonderful different opportunities to train students in different techniques. Students had to learn how to use a geological core, which is the image that you see up here. Students also got to learn how to use drones and take drone imagery. Students also were able to learn how to use a total station. We usually have a couple different ways to take X, Y, and Z points and coordinates, but the total station was extremely useful and helpful with this season and this project. And then, of course, with any project that you work on, you're going to have to learn how to do the paperwork. It's not all fun and games and digging in the ground. There's paperwork that's associated with every hole that you ever excavate. And so they were it was a wonderful group of students that were very accommodating and wanting to learn. They were eager to learn all these different aspects. And on the off chance that we had a rain day, you never know what's going to happen. We only had one real rain day that whole 2-week season, which is amazing in April, right? You never know how it's going to be. But on rain days, we tend to go to different museum storage facilities and go through the materials from other excavations. This happened to be going through materials from a previous excavation at Békésfürdő and going through those materials, having the students familiarize themselves with the different types of ceramics that are from this site and from this time period, and to see how those ceramics vary over time, as well as to note if there are any similarities in materials that they are finding at their site. So it's fun little projects like that. Now, like I said, we opened up 3 blocks. One of them didn't produce the results that we were looking for. We thought we were going to hit a structure there, a house, and it ended up producing a very ephemeral layer. So we don't think that it survived very well. But our other 2 blocks produced some really amazing results. So one block happened to have an intrusive burial. This is actually going to be from the medieval times. That's going into our Bronze Age house. How rude. But it's a very shallow grave because they got down to the building material that the people were using in the Bronze Age, which is basically going to be mud and sticks they were using. We call it wattle and daub. And because they hit a harder layer of daub, they were like, good enough. This is a shallow grave. This is where we're going to place him. And that's what they did. But next to that grave, we continued down past the daub, and we got to this area right here. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but what we have here is a hearth. And it's a hearth that's been reused time and time again, so that it has these nice thick layers of clay that are then exposed to fire, heated, and it almost presents as a ceramic vessel that's really flat against the surface. And when we first came across it, we were like, oh, look at this vessel. And then we were like, nope, 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 nope. But this is exactly what we wanted, because if you have a hearth, you have a house. And we want to be able to more fully expose this house. And that's what we're going to do in 2024. The third block that we had was actually known as Block 2, too far away, because it was so far. And in Block 2, we also came down on this daub level right here. And so we have another structure that we want to expose more because it's a really well-preserved layer that has signs of firing right up here with the dark, burnt, ashy area. And it has, in the profile, we went and did a little sondage to go past it. And you can actually see it's pretty distinct. We have 2 different layers right here. So we probably have 2 different levels of house on top of one another. So that will also be interesting to further explore in the future. All right, so that was 2023 in April. What happened next, you might ask? Next, we went up to Chickman-Kapostashto, right up here. So this is the Prehistoric Interactions on the Plain project. This is my baby. This is the project that I direct and been directing since 2013. This season, we lasted from, or we held the season from May 22nd until June 18th. Chickman-Kapostashto is a late Neolithic tell site with an external settlement area. It runs from about 5,000 BC all the way to about 4,300 BC. And that's really interesting because it's kind of revolutionizing our understanding about the chronological sequence in the area, pushing this potentially a little bit further back because we know that there's still the same people living here. So that's all very interesting. Up here, if I can show you really quickly, we have also done that magnetometry work that I was telling you about, looking at those subsurface features. Every purple rectangle that you see up here is an archaeological house that was identified with magnetometry. The overall extent of the settlement is demarcated with this red hash mark that you can see up here. We have 101 hectares for this settlement. This is the largest late Neolithic settlement, not just in Hungary, but in Eastern Europe. It's massive, it's impressive. I'm so proud of it. Right here we have the tell itself. And it has a couple concentric ditches going around it. And we have external settlement areas that go both to the east of the tell, to the west of the tell, to the north, and also to the southwest of the tell. So it's really massive. And we're still trying to understand the different features that we're coming across. Because as far as we knew, this isn't supposed to happen. The extent of the settlement, okay, there are other sites that can be fairly comparable in size. But for what we knew about this culture, which is known as the Riebe culture, they were only supposed to really have these restricted, smaller settlements that were more or less just the tell. This is not just a tell. So our understanding about what it means to be Riebe is transforming as well because of this research. In 2022, we carried out test excavations on a number of these different household structures that we identified with magnetometry in order to get a sense of what was below the surface, to get a sense of the preservation. Are these things like blown out because tractors have been like plowing through them for the last, 70 years, or are they still intact? That was a very good question. You can see the distribution of those test units up here, wherever you see those white numbers. We have a little yellow dot right next to it. We opened only 1 by 1 meter excavation units. That's in order to minimize the impact on the structure itself and also get like a sample, a taste of what's beneath the surface. Get a relative understanding of what we could find. Here's a couple of pictures of what those excavation test units look like. After removing the plow zone, we continued going down until we got to sterile. This is a dirty picture down there, sorry. But I wanted to show you this because of the different stratigraphic levels that we have present. You might notice right here, this huge section, this is all daub. This is like, it's about 60 centimeters worth of daub cap. It's really massive. And then over here, you can also see a daub cap, which is indicative of the housing of the structures right here. So another fairly massive daub cap there. Now, we opened up 12 of these excavation units in 2022, and all the units produced different radiocarbon dates. There's different samples that we could send out for radiocarbon dating. And so based on that, we got that range between 5,000, the earliest part of the settlements right over here, until around 4,300 BC right here. Now, based on those test excavations, in 2023, we wanted to expand on that and to open up those test blocks even further. So we targeted areas both on tell as well as off tell. And I know this is kind of fuzzy and hard to see. These are our magnetometric features that I told you about. Remember, all of these are different houses. So we had 1 or 2 houses. We didn't know if this was going to be 1 house or 2 houses. It ended up being 2 houses. But we had 2 blocks on a house on top of the tell. And then we had 2 blocks on a house that was off tell. Now, luckily for us, this did end up being 2 different houses. And we know that based on depositional levels and everything like that, and also the materials that were collected. These are just blow-ups of those maps. So here's the on-tell structure, or structures rather, and here's that off-tell structure. The work that was carried out in 2023 really could not have been done without the help and support of amazing colleagues and friends. Each block had their own block captain, and I couldn't be a block captain because I was running around making sure everything was going right for everybody else. And so one of the block captains was my husband, who's also an archaeologist. One was a colleague who just got his PhD, so he just defended in May, and we were very excited for him. Another was a former student who's been on the project for 3 years, and so she was now ready to run her own block. And then the other one was a former student who went on to get her master's with Attila, my husband, and myself as her co-advisor, working at the site of Chiknukapostashtom and writing her thesis about this site. So she was most assuredly ready to run her own block as well. This was a fantastic team, and they ran their blocks marvelously. And because they were able to do that, we were able to get data that was by far the best data that we've ever had at any of these Harapai sites. It's pretty amazing. So this is going to be that first block that was run by Billy Ridge, and this is going to be on top of the tell. I know it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to walk you through it. And if you join Instagram, you'll literally see me walking you through that block because I took a video of it. So here we have an entrance. This is a doorway right here. And there's like these little, I call them artisanal stones that are making a little path right there. So you go through the doorway, and over here, you have a hearth up here. And then if you continue on, you have a plaster floor all over here. Now the plaster floor is spotty in some areas, but the plaster floor is even present. It's pretty remarkable. And then if you get over here, we get some other amazing finds. Oh, there. Oh, that's what I want to show you. Oh no, too fast. Here's a blow up of that area. We have post holes, 2 big post holes right there. And then over here in this corner, I know it's really hard to see, but we actually have this area that's dug into the ground, plastered, and then also has like this, it's a clay plaster that's lining it, and it's a groundstone preparation area. And we have the groundstone in situ right there. It's that little rectangle thing. But of course, that runs into our profile. Of course it does. So we can't excavate it out. You have to leave it there for the next season, unless you expand. So we have to expand in the future, Jack. The other house on top of the tell was a 2x2 excavation unit. And this one, we were like, oh man, we're not really finding much. We have this like big post hole thing that was really odd and weirdly positioned. But then on the last day, and this always happens on the last day, we came down on this. And it looks ugly. But I have some blow-ups of it, and I have the reconstruction too. Here's a side picture. Oh, that you'll never fully see. All right, so this is the side. It curves down like this, and it's all ceramic. This is going to be a furnace, and it also runs into the profile. We have these reconstructions of what the furnace would look like. So this is the side right here. This is the side right here of that furnace. And it is a late Neolithic Harapai furnace. Very characteristic for what we know about this culture. So next season, we're going to get that furnace. Now off-tell, let's go there. Off-tell, we had 2 blocks as well. The first block resulted in us going through this wonderful plow zone. I'm sorry, not plow zone. We'll wait about that. We went through this wonderful daub path. You can see the edges of the daub path in the image right here. And then we had some hits below the house too that were from a previous occupation level. And then in addition to that, we had the second excavation block that was a 2x2. We also had the daub path, kind of see right here. And you see all of this right here, that's all daub, so that building material. But from this other section, notice how it's like big black pit of nothingness? That was a well. That well continued down 1.5 meters. And in that well, it's jam-packed full of ceramics, full of daub, full of bone. And what it looks like is that that well dates to an earlier period of the site being inhabited. And then somebody was like, fill it up. We're going to build a house on top of it. And that's exactly what they did. They leveled it out and built the house exactly on top of it. So it's a quick fill episode. Now, granted, we are still waiting for the C14 dates to come back for all of these different areas across the site, but fingers crossed we'll get those in the next couple weeks. Now on PIP, we also participate in lab work. You already saw some of the training that students got to do for the spring season at Bekesvardom. Similarly, students got to learn about coring on this site. They got to also participate in soil chemistry analysis. They got to learn about the RTK setup, which is another way to take GPS points, so the XYZ coordinates for everything at the site. And then in the evenings, they got to participate in flotation. So we take soil samples from every single excavation unit and you expose it to water. The light stuff like burnt seeds, that's gonna float to the surface and you're gonna catch it in this little net right here. And then the stuff that's heavier, like ceramics or little chipstone tools and stuff like that, they're gonna fall down into this area that, or it's the net's right here. We call it heavy fraction, but they sink, and we're gonna catch it in the second net. And then all the dirt is gonna fall all the way down to the bottom and become sludge. We don't care about sludge. So students got to analyze the the heavy fraction, that's what I want to say. They got to study the heavy fraction. We had a specialist come out, an archaeobotanical specialist, who studied the light fraction materials too. We had students that were working on ceramic analysis. We had students that got to participate in micro excavations of different pots that had material in it. And of course, I mentioned earlier that we have a lecture series in the evenings, 2 to 3 times a week. They also got to do that or listen to that. The last project that I'm going to talk about is the most recent project in the region, and that's going to take place at Base du Magor right here. So the Base du Magor Conservation Exhibition Project, it has a long name, ran from July 3rd to July 31st. It consisted, once again, of a number of different students from both UGA as well as from Cardiff University, University of York, from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and I think I'm missing something. Oh, from Szeged University in Hungary. So we had a very diverse group there. And I think I forgot to mention, but on the PIP project, we had students from UNG as well as 8 students from UGA. So again, a large number of students coming on these different projects. So the Base du Magor site is going to be a prehistoric tell. And I'm just going to call it that because it's gone through a number of different episodic events. Beginning first with its occupation during the Neolithic, all the way through, we have periods of occupation during the Copper Age, during the Bronze Age, and then it becomes eventually like a medieval monastery, and then it becomes a wine cellar for this really fancy nobleman in the area. So it's had a lovely life, a very long life. And today, it happens to be part of a national park. And so in the 1980s, there was this brilliant idea. We have this large tell. It's the largest tell in Hungary, the largest in terms of height, about like 7 meters of accumulated deposits. And that's pretty impressive for Hungary. And so in the 80s, they decided to dig a big ditch inside the tell, and this is the entrance to that ditch inside the tell. And now it's going to be an enclosed, open, excavated area. It looks like this. Oh, no, stop it. There. And during this project, during the month of July, we're working on excavating, conserving, and also keeping in mind how we want it to be presented in exhibition form in the future. So this is what the trench looks like. It's pretty impressive, 12 meters in length by about 5 meters in width. And you have various periods that are represented, going back to the Bronze Age all the way at the top, going down to those Neolithic levels all the way at the bottom. And then you can see the various platforming that occurs in order to represent different activity areas. Most of these things were found in situ, so you found like in the place that it was excavated. So you have this individual that dates to early Copper Age period that is buried with these different vessels, that has this nice large piece of groundstone tool in his hand. So all of these things, while they're somewhat staged, they're more or less found in the position, or more or less placed in the position that they were found in. So why are we excavating this? It's already been excavated. But the problem is that this was excavated in the 80s, and then the walls have been exposed. They've been exposed to moisture, to fluctuating temperatures. They've been exposed to like leaks in the ceiling. There's been a number of different things. They've been exposed to critters. And the park has tried to conserve it as best they can. If you look up at this wall right here, you can see that it's like really sheery looking. And that's because they put a plaster up there, a plaster render to hold the wall up. But the renders are failing. And when they fail, they pull off a lot of excess material too. So we're having to go in and we're cutting it back. We're cutting it back just by like an inch or so, digging into the wall in order to expose a fresh surface. In doing that, we come across new objects. We have whole vessels that are being exposed, and we take those out and we can put them back in their position later on. Now, once we expose the fresh wall, we take a lot of different pictures. We're taking a lot of different measurements, and we're also becoming skilled brick makers. We're taking the excavated material and turning the excavated dirt into bricks. These bricks are then going back into the tell, into the excavation block, in order to create this render wall that we're then going to apply a plaster to, and then we're going to paint on the stratigraphic layers, because that's the best way to preserve the wall. And that's been noted at a lot of different sites, including like Çatalhöyük, famous site in Turkey. And in fact, the conservators that we're working with worked at Çatalhöyük for over a decade, but now we have them here in Hungary. We snagged them. So you can see our brick making factory right here, directed by Lola, my non-emotional support dog, and our stockpile of brick and what a brick wall looks like. So by the end of the 2023 season, we have a lot of different brick walls already in place. We have one render wall here, we have another brick wall here, and another brick wall here. Not every single wall needs to be cut back with a brick facade added to it, but you can see here we have overhang. This is going to shear off eventually, and when it does, it's going to be detrimental to the integrity of the overall platform. So we need to take care of it now and build a wall up against it. This is going to conserve the trench for years to come. And don't think that this is the final step. Remember, we're going to put that plaster on top of it and then paint in the stratigraphic levels that we can clearly see. Like right up here, you can see the black layer with the white layer on top, followed by the little like yellow mottled layer. We're eventually going to have those different stratigraphic levels displayed on the render wall as well. Now, as the last part of this project, we are keeping in mind the exhibition concept. And we have come up with a poster that basically describes everything that we're doing in this excavation trench, explaining to the public, both in Hungarian as well as in English, about what the goals are for the project, what the walls look like before. If they look at the brick wall, they can see it now. And then what it will look like in the future after we get that plaster render on and paint in the stratigraphic levels. And then we want to know how we can make that user experience better for them in the future. And so we have a Google form that they can access and answer these various questions that will help to steer us as we think about how we're going to create this exhibition in the future, or how we're going to revamp the exhibition in the future. And of course, this being a goal to preserve the tell, we've also made shirts. and we wear them to all of our conferences and various functions, our little Save Magor shirts. We're very proud of them. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how much fun we have on this project. On not just this one project, on all of our projects. I work with a really excellent group of colleagues, collaborators, but most importantly, friends. And I've been very lucky to find this group of people. And we have so many memories, and we pass those memories on to students too. Even if they're scary, like Antler Man down here, or they're so overwhelming with emotion, they cause tears, like birthday parties. It's wonderful to be part of a community that you love. Now, with that in mind, I also have to give a little sneak preview for what's coming in terms of student opportunities. So in the summer 2024, we're going to have 3 different seasons. They vary in terms of length and how many people we can take. The Kurdish consortium that's going to be working at the site of Bekeş Bardum is going to focus on the Broad Age Tell site of Bardum, and they're going to do excavations, intensive excavations, expanding to include the larger, or to open up those excavation blocks to expose whole houses. That's going to be from May 5th to June 8th, and we're going to take 6 students on that project. The prehistoric interactions on the plane project, it's a study season this year. We have a lot of data. We are going to be primarily doing lab work, but we might be opening some 1-by-1 test excavations in areas that we don't have dates for. So just to like fill in some gaps for C14 dating. So that project's going to take place just a short 2-week season, June 17th through the 30th, and I'll be taking 2 students on that project. Vestü Magor Conservation Exhibition Project is going to be focusing on Vestü Magor. We'll be doing the conservation and excavation, just like I mentioned. And it's going to take place from July 1st through the 31st, and we'll take 2 to 4 students on that project. The first 2 projects are NSF, National Science Foundation funded projects. And so because of that, we are able to fully fund students to travel to Hungary for their room, for their board. The Vestü Magor Conservation Project, that one's a little harder. We have money for room and board for sure. But the flight is the hard part for a lot of people, and it's a hard part for us too. If we have funds or we can apply for extra funds, we are happy to do so, and that's why we limit it to 2 to 4 students. It comes down to funding for that one. So with that in mind, be on the lookout for an advertisement coming to you soon in November 2023. In November 2022, we put out that advertisement. We got 12 applicants. We took all 12 students to Hungary, and we were able to fund everybody that year. We already anticipate getting more, and the application is fairly rigorous. So put your best foot forward when doing those applications. All right, I know my time is coming to an end. I'd like to thank you all. These are all of our generous supporters from different funding agencies that are funding all 3 of these different projects currently in various forms. So thank you guys. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Yes. Oh, no, not related at all. So I was interested, originally I was interested in studying Eastern Europe and the Black Sea area. I was interested in understanding how interactions between nomadic peoples and sedentary peoples impacted identity over a long period. And I really dug the Scythians of the Iron Age. But I got into grad school with that. And then my first year of grad school, my advisor, Bill Parkinson, was like, I work in Hungary. Do you want to come on a dig with me? And I was like, okay. And so I went on that dig in Hungary and I got sucked in. I still look at how interaction impacts sociocultural identity. So my theoretical interests have remained the same. My temporal and regional focus just shifted slightly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you see in your projects that something more about climate change in the world, Europe?
Yes, absolutely. So we see this weird thing happen at the end of Neolithic. During the Neolithic, we get these formations of the tells, right? Then tells are abandoned after the late Neolithic. Something shifts, something changes. And it's oftentimes been associated with like changing trade networks, but there's also a change in temperature. Climate changes at that time. And we know that based on different cores that we have, specifically from lakes over in Austria, for instance, that tell us about changing temperatures, changing climate as evidenced by like pollen and such. So we know that temperature does change over time, and that it has devastating impacts on how people are organizing themselves in the landscape. That's a simple answer. I don't know if there are any questions on.
No, there are none. Oh, wait a minute. Here is one. What was the different uses of the tell from that to Mager again?
From what were the different uses of the tell at Base Harbor? So different from the other tells, or just different? It's okay. So temporally, the use of the tell changes not that much from like the late Neolithic to the Bronze or Copper Age to the Bronze Age. Like people are still utilizing it for fairly the same purposes. What changes is the size of the tell. We see that the ditches expand. We see that a couple times over about 1,000 years. But then the tell will become abandoned and it's resettled again by like monks. So we know that it becomes an area for vineyards, and that kind of impacts things a little bit. And they manipulate the area, they alter the landscape, and they also dig into the tell and kind of make it these two little areas. It's really kind of odd. So the tell use does change over time, but it's because people are changing too. And the land gets acquired then by the nobleman that I mentioned, and he makes part of the wine or part of the tell into a wine cellar. That's now contemporary. That's now a modern day museum. So the tell use does change over time, but more from like prehistoric to modern times, or more modern times. Prehistoric to historic times. Yes. 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 Everybody loves scrubbing artifacts. There's plenty of space. And if not, we can put you up in the hotel too. It has AC. We do not have AC.
I'll be happy to come in, even if there's no AC.
Are you having any trouble getting people to volunteer to listen to you?
Nope, we usually maximize the space that we have.
You're doing very well there, so I just wondered.
Yeah, we attract not just students from the US, but students from Europe too. And that's an important aspect of the project, getting students to come from Germany, from Serbia. I've had students from Croatia, from Greece too. And yeah, so it's drawing a number of different students. And of course, Hungarian students too. Awesome. Well, you guys have been a lovely time.
Presentation before?
No.
Will be a heck of a recruiting gig there.
And you say that, and it's funny because when I was putting together the PowerPoint, I was like, man, finding pictures is like so hard. Because usually when you give presentations, you're like recycling from this presentation or that presentation. And so doing the PIP part was like easy enough. But then I'm like, oh, I have to do all this for Package Fardom, and I have to do it for Base to Magor. And so it was a brand new, almost completely new PowerPoint.
But it should just settle pretty well.
I'm going around to all the universities. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Manny, I apologize. I apologize that the screen wasn't how you wanted it.
Oh my God.
I know, I just don't even know how to do this over
None
here.
of that is your fault.
Can we just blame Manny?
Yes, sure.